I'm Ryan Poirier, and you're listening to the True North Country Comics Podcast.
Welcome to the True North Country Comics Podcast, dedicated to promote Canadian comic book creators and supporters. It's November 16th, 2020. I'm John Swinimer. If you have a comment, criticism, or question, you can contact me at john@truenorthcountrycomics.com. On this episode, I chat with Ryan Poirier about WhitCAF 2020. The podcast is available on Apple Podcasts and Google Podcasts. And don't forget the new YouTube channel. Hosted by the Whitby Library in Whitby, Ontario, the annual Comic Arts Festival celebrates comic book creators and makers in a variety of fun and entertaining activities, including exhibits, panels, readings, artist alley, contests, and more. Ryan is an artist, illustrator, and writer with a lifelong passion for art. He graduated with a degree in multimedia design in 2002 and has produced work for major media companies. He's published 2 books in the past 3 years titled The Herd, with another book coming early next year. Today he lives with his wife and daughter in Ontario. While he pays his bills working in the IT field, his passion continues in his art and writing with The Herd and other original stories under his independent media company, Accidental Creations. So without further ado, here's my chat with Ryan Poirier about WhitCAF 2020. So Ryan Poirier, thank you very much for taking time to chat with me.
No, my pleasure.
What I normally do to start off the interview is ask a creator about their first comic book. So I know I'm putting you on the spot, but do you remember what was the first comic book that you read?
It was Batman Armageddon 20. I forget. You know what? It's on my shelf right next to me, but I have to root through. But it was like a what if. It was Batman's my religion, basically. And it was kind of like a what if, like if Batman just kind of snapped and just went and killed all of his rogues.
Wow.
And it was an intense comic, and it was kind of I think it was like the Wave Rider was going through different timelines, and I think that was the one that I picked up. It was that one, and in elementary school I used to read like Garfield or Peanuts. I grew up on those as well. But I think the one that really hooked me was that first Batman comic.
Cool. That's good stuff. I'm wondering, does anyone, an artist or maybe any other influence, inspire you to create today?
Definitely a lot of the old school. Growing up watching Looney Tunes and Walt Disney and stuff. So like Chuck Jones and the Batman animated series.
Bruce Timm.
Yeah, his artwork really inspired me. Like I remember it was just at like a prime age of my life, I think, and just kind of when I was learning how to teach myself to draw. Like I always liked to doodle, and Disney animation was always such a huge inspiration for me. Like that's all I would watch when I was a kid. And then when he did the animated series of Batman, that was kind of what I started to, I guess, practice as drawing. Like I used to draw a lot of my own Batman comics or my own Wile E. Coyote cartoons, like just as comic strips. And it was all because of grade 5, we had to create our own comic strip and as a school assignment. And that's what just opened my mind to the whole thing. So a lot of those artists, and then more recently, I guess, well, ever since I saw Clerks, but Kevin Smith has always been a huge inspiration for me. Just his message of just, make your voice your own currency and just, tell your story. So, and that was always a huge inspiration. So those are some artists that I kind of inspire from. Tim Burton as well.
Sure. Oh, that's good stuff.
I always like Tim Burton's work.
Absolutely. So I'm wondering, what is the newest project that you're promoting these days?
I'm still working on The Herd. So that's like my biggest project that I've been working on for a while. So I'm just about to release book 4. I'm just working on the final few pages. It was supposed to be a 1-volume book, but it would have been 400 plus pages. So I decided, I'm like, I'm going to break these up. So they've released 3 parts so far. Once part 4 is out, hopefully by the end of the year, I'll be working on 2 other books. One with my wife. It's going to be like a book for like little kids, like like a thick card kind of book. But it's going to be called Everly and Finnegan, and it's about a fox and an elephant.
Okay.
And then after that, I'm doing another graphic novel series called Farm Freaks.
Okay.
And so both of those I plan on having out next year.
Cool. But The Herd is available now, you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the first 3 books are available now.
For those not familiar with that series, can you talk a little bit about it? What is it all about?
Basically, it reads like a 90s Saturday morning cartoon. It's a superhero comedy that just completely makes fun of the genre and parodies pop culture in general. That's the tone that it reads at. But the story is about an anthropomorphic character. They're all animals. So the main family is a family of foxes. They live in a city called Maple City, and the main character, Fox Kennedy, is like the 10th generation of this company that kind of is like the soul of the city. It's kind of like the main source of revenue. It's a juice factory company, and they make all kinds of weird fruit related products. And there's a disgruntled employee, Professor Dr. Monkeyshine, who is working undercover for another secret organization, and he wants to use the company's secret formula to make a super serum so that him and the other organization can take over Maple City. But his serum accidentally falls into a juice balling line and gets sent out to the city as a new product, and whoever drinks it wakes up next morning with very weird powers, and some of them are world altering powers, like being able to change reality, and they're dangerous, whereas some are completely useless, like being able to make ice cubes out of thin air.
Okay.
Or a snake grows legs and he's just pumped that he can wear flip flops. So I mean, it's very just ridiculous.
Sure.
It's going to the edge and then pushing it even more to just nuts. So the main character, Fantastic Fox, he's fantastic at everything he does. He sees something, he's instantly the best at it. He can't die because he's fantastic at living. So it's the whole thing just kind of makes fun of the superhero genre.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's an ongoing series. So this is volume 1 of a 5-part story arc that I've planned out.
Cool. Sounds like fun. So you touched on this briefly, but I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit how you got your start in making comic books.
Well, like I said it before, originally it was a grade 5 project, and then it just, I don't know, it was just, I'd already liked to do drawing, like, just drawing, I mean, back then I didn't create my own characters. I was just drawing like The Simpsons or Looney Tunes, whatever, Darkwing Duck. When I did that project, I created my own character, and he was this bald-headed guy named Doofus. And it just opened Pandora's box. And from there, from grade 5 on, I just practiced drawing every day, creating new characters, creating this, what I call accidental creations. It's what my personal business company is called. And it kind of umbrellas all my different stories. Because before The Herd, I was working on another series called The Fates, but it was a lot more adult, whereas The Herd is kind of for all ages. So I was like, I'm gonna, if I'm gonna do something, I want to kind of get my broadest audience as possible rather than just really narrowing it down. So I put that one on hold. But like, these are all characters that I've just created my own comic strips for. I think I've got like a bin of like 30 books that I've written over the years, sitting there, of all these stories, of 7 different main stories that I've written of different characters, different worlds. And just one day I was like, and then I went to school for multimedia design, and I had Chorus Entertainment for the better part of a year. I worked on stuff for YTV and Treehouse. And, I worked on the Berenstein Bears and Baby, right. That. But that field was, it was always contract. And even though I was working on the stuff I like doing, and I went to school for, I've always kind of been one to like tell my own stories. Because even like I'm working on like the Berenstein Bears, and then the second I could have a break, I'm drawing my own stuff. And that's when I was developing The Herd. That was back in like 2003, I think.
Okay.
So The Herd's been developing over the long period of time, and finally it was just I rewrote the story over and over and over again. I got different opinions and restructured the characters. I went to Comic Cons and talked to like other comic artists and like people, like professionals, like people who like work with DC and stuff. Like I would meet like a comic artist and ask him and just pick his brain. I met Paul Dini and I picked his brain on story tips.
Cool.
then just rewrote it, and it's just a story I wanted to tell. And I mean, this is what I would like to do eventually as a living. In the meantime, I'm working for a bank and I do IT and stuff, but
Right, right.
it's this is what my passion, I guess, always has, and it's just is ever since I just that one grade 5 project. It just opened something up and it never closed, and it
That's
just
great.
so eventually I was like, why not? Might as well just tell these people these stories and see if I can go somewhere with it, because otherwise it's just sitting there. Like you can
Right, right.
sit there and follow, hope your dream comes true, but nothing's going to happen if you don't actually do something with it. So
There you go. That's true. So I'm wondering if you have any single piece of advice for newcomers who want to get started into making comic books.
definitely do your research. As far as it all depends on what route you want to go. If you want to go with a publisher, the advantages to that are, they help get your story out there and stuff like that. They help promote your book. But the disadvantage, though, of course, of course, they take a cut of the sales and everything that's expected. But the disadvantage too is sometimes, depending on the publishing company, they can sometimes have some say into where your story should go, depending on how the audience is reacting to it. Whereas self-publishing, you have more control. It's your project, but you got to do all the footwork.
Right, right.
And that's what I did. And I went the self-publishing route. And in doing that, there are also different venues. I went with Friesen Press, which is a great independent publishing company. They're located in Victoria, BC. And that's the other thing too, is if you want to go with a publishing company, publishing or a self-publishing company, there is some cost behind it, but also you want to kind of really look at all the small print, because if you're dealing with across the border with the States, there can be a lot of copyright issues that can come up. Whereas in Canada, copyright's a lot simpler. As long as you can, prove it's yours, it's copyright. Right. So that's why I went with Canadian.
Oh, very good.
The advantage with going with that, with Friesen Press, for example, they provide a huge outlet of online availability, like 3,900 outlets. Like it's crazy. Like it's all the way to Europe, all the way to Australia, everywhere. And also they order to print, and they basically like have everything set up for you. You just got to print and order your books and stuff. They have an editor who goes over your book and gives you, depending on how much you want to pay, they provide more editing, of course, but they fine tune some certain things.
Oh, right, yeah.
They provide marketing advice, some sessions and stuff. So they really provide a great setup. And that's really important, especially if you have no idea what you're doing.
Right, right.
But, of course, there's a cost to it. So it all depends on what your budget is and what package you want to go to. So I did that with my first 2 books. But when I was looking at kind of output and, like how much it was actually costing me, I was like, I'm going to try for the next one. Now that I know how this kind of works, I'm going to try to go even more self-publishing, and in which I just found my own editors, got other people to edit my stuff. It had multiple people edit it. That's the other thing. You always want to make sure, don't just read it yourself. Use Grammarly, of course. Grammarly is great. And have many other people read it. Take criticism and have people, not just a family and friends, have them read it, but like get other people to read it. Like, a friend who would be more critical about it, just so, you can fine tune it so that it might help you progress down the line. So I did that, and then I found a local printer. Shout out to Studio Comics Press. They're out in Kitchener, and they're awesome. It all depends on how that's the route I went, and that was a lot more cost effective for what I was looking for at the time, especially now with COVID, because Comic Cons are, I don't know when they're happening again.
Right. Yeah. Right.
I don't have any regrets going either way. They're both great learning experiences. So it all depends on how you want to go, but you need to do your research and know what your budget is. Don't overshoot. Like, don't, go and buy an overhead of like 1,000 books, because you got to hope that you're going to make that money back.
Right, exactly.
That's not just sitting there. And of course, look up local Comic Cons. Pop Culture Canada, they do great local Comic Cons around the area. Like they do like Peterborough, like Coburg, Oshawa, Whitby. So like it's all like smaller town ones, but it's a lot cheaper than going to like the Toronto Fan Expo, which could
Right.
The tables are very expensive. And those ones are the good ones because you go to these little towns who don't have this kind of media as a regular thing. So when a Comics Con comes there and is like all these, sometimes they have, the odd celebrity that comes as well. But when it's like this pop culture stuff invades for a weekend in some of these small communities, like, Peterborough or something, you get a lot of attention. And it's just a lot of footwork. When you do self-publishing, do go to the comic stores and do consignment deals. Typically a consignment deal, if you're going to a comic store, I think it's like 30-70 typically. So like 30% to them, 70% to you when sales come. And what they would do is they might buy some books right out front, or they'll take on some, like, so you want to make sure you have some already, and you're willing to sacrifice, maybe giving away X amount, and realize you might not get that money back. But that's why you just kind of, like, what I've been doing is the money that I make, I just cycle back into it and just work within it and just do it smart, so you're not putting yourself in debt over a side business, because unless you have enough money to make this as your core focus, you need to have it. You need to be budget about it. So, and these are just all things I've kind of learned along the way, I guess. So
sure, lots of good advice there. That's for sure. I wanted to just take a step back and talk a little bit broader terms about the role that libraries and library events like WhitCAF play in fostering comic books and their creation. I'm wondering what your thoughts are on that.
I think it's important. The physical media, like the physical actual like paper, is becoming more and more of a lost art. Like comic stores and stuff like that, they're becoming a dying breed. And it's nice to have the digital thing, but we're relying too much on digital. And when you have these little events, I think it just humbles people in this kind of entertainment. It's its own thing. And some things need to be old school. Some things need to be a physical thing and just be how it was. And that's just my opinion. I think, when it comes to like self-publishing, having, podcasts and social media to help get your work out there or get other people to notice it has become like a blessing to these days, like versus back like in the like early 90s, 80s, where you had to like mail everything by snail mail, wait for a response. But at the same time, it's just the way things are now is kind of made us forget about how it was. And I think when libraries and other, conventions, stuff that physically has paper in your hand and the smell of comics and the smell of books, you can't replace that. And future generations are going to forget about it. And it's like people who are more nostalgic and continue to do these things, keep it alive. I think that's very important.
Cool. Do you have any favorite memories from past library events that you've attended?
Well, the WhitCAF ones.
Okay.
They've all been great, and I'm enjoying returning to each of them. And probably the Peterborough Comic Con I did with Pop Culture. That one was the best. I did the most amount of sales that day between selling artwork and comics, and it was. If you're doing this for the money right from the get-go, like, you shouldn't be. Like, the money comes later. The important part is to tell your story.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But I won't lie. It is nice, of course, when the money comes in, when you're doing it. But, like, that day it was really good in sales, and it I don't know, it put a real pluck in my step. It was just like, okay, and this is getting out there. And then a couple of people had already been to a previous Comic-Con and bought the first book, and we're there now. My second book is available, and they're looking for it. They're like, well, I want to see where the story goes.
Right.
There's a few other connections that happened there, because when you're talking to people at these things, you never know who you run into. Like, I've met some really interesting people, and I've met some really good contacts doing these things.
Great. Good stuff. Now, you touched briefly on some of your future projects. those are going to be available. I presume you're planning those for. I think you mentioned a children's book. Is that planned for 2021?
Yeah, hopefully, if
Okay.
everything goes good. I mean, these things always take because I'm doing the story writing and the artwork, so it's a lot of work.
Oh yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure. So
But
where can people find out more about your future projects and maybe your existing books and products that are available right now?
well, my website, accidentalcreations.ca, that site I have links to other locations that like Amazon. It's on Amazon. It's on Google Play. Like the digital book is on Google Play. The well, that's it. That's the other little comment too. When you have your book on multiple different locations like Amazon or Google, the little hitch is sometimes the pricing will vary, and it's completely out of your control. And that's not to knock any of the companies. I don't want to shoot myself in the foot here,
Right.
but like versus like for example, like I would sell my book on my site for like when I'm at my Comic Con on my site, they're $20 a book, but they're 100 pages plus. So I mean, and they're full color. So it's, I guess, the average cost. But if you go to, I think it's one of the Amazon sites, one of the other sites, I can't remember what it's, Amazon or Indigo or something, but I found it on one of the other sites and it was priced at $65.
Oh my.
And I wrote them. I said, "This isn't right." Like, and I never got a response. And I tried to look into it. It was end up being like some places just price it as they want. Like, I don't really
Right.
understand how it works, but
Mm-hmm.
so I guess the best place to get my book is from my website. If you want to read a digital version of it, also from my website, and on Google Play, like the Google Bookstore, they have it set up where you can read the first chapter for free, something like that, like as a free preview.
Great. Well, Ryan, those are all the questions I have for you, but I'm wondering if there's something I didn't ask that you'd like to get across in this interview.
Just anyone out there who wants to venture down this, like, it is nerve-wracking, and it is, it takes time. It takes a lot of time, but if you have a story to tell, like, tell it, and it's eventually it'll tickle somebody. Everyone likes something differently. So if you have a story to tell and you want it to be, and it's your passion to tell it, like, you're made to do something. And if you feel it's to write and, you're do artwork and team up with someone who does writing, go for it. Like, sitting there and wondering and saying, I want to do this. Well, great, but it's not going to happen if you don't actually do it. So just do it. You have nothing to lose. And at the very least, your story's told and you've left your fingerprint in the digital media or the literary media in some way. Your fingerprint is left. You've left something there after you're gone. So it's always worth it.
Thanks to Ryan for the chat. You can discover more about Ryan on Twitter at RPOIRIER_author and online at accidentalcreations.ca. And you can discover more about WhitCAF 2020 at whitbylibrary.ca/WhitCAF. Thanks to you for listening to the True North Country Comics podcast. If you've done so already, please subscribe to and like this podcast on Apple Podcasts, and please leave a good rating. Also check out the TrueNorthCountryComics.com website and follow along on Twitter at True North Comics. True North Country Comics is now on YouTube. Please like and subscribe to that video channel. And please send your feedback to John at TrueNorthCountryComics.com. Thanks again for listening, and come back soon for another episode. Bye for now. True North Country Comics Podcast is copyright True North Country Comics, copyright 2020.